εγώ είμαι Θεός, ο πριν και έστω το παν, και πρωτοστήνε την γη και των ουρανών, κοινώς κοντά πάντα, ως όρος πατρί και όρφερον εν ήμι.
Δόξα σοι ο Θεός ημών, δόξα σοι, λόγος συνέστησαν των ουρανών αματική, συνείδηνα το πατρί και διαλόγου φέρω το όδετο παν, ο λόγος σοφία και δύναμης και οίκων και συνεργός και ισουργός.
Δόξα σοι ο Θεός ημών, δόξα σοι, εις όρους επετών, εις ο αιώνας.
Greetings, Uncle Travelling Matt here, and today is the video for what I think is the 7th or 8th day of my trip around Cyprus. I'm not quite sure, I have lost with the counting. And as you can see, today I'm not in a hotel room like usual, but I am actually on the beach, which is quite rare for me. I'm not really what you would call a beach person, but this is a very special beach, as you might be able to guess from the scene behind me. So the place is called Varosha, and Varosha is a Turkish word. It means suburb, because this area was built as the suburb to Famagusta, which is the ancient port city of Cyprus, which is about a half mile that way. And it was called a Varosha because ever since the invasion of 1571, when the Ottomans took the city, the old city has been primarily inhabited by the Turks. So the Greeks moved here, and they turned this into one of the first holiday resorts in the Mediterranean. It was the Monte Carlo of the Eastern Mediterranean, and it was all singing, all dancing. Apparently there was a famous orange festival every year. All until the 1974 invasion, when the Turkish army took it, but they didn't do anything, they didn't resettle anyone here, they didn't develop it, because they wanted to use it as a bargaining chip which they've still not used, and so it is basically a ghost town. And this ghost town of Varosha is one of the main reasons why I wanted to come to Cyprus. I am a bit of a sucker for divided countries, and, you know, dilapidated buildings. Reminds me a bit when I went to Chernobyl and the abandoned city of Pripyat. I'd expected the abandoned city of Pripyat to be more like this, but actually that's very, very overgrown, whereas this isn't. And until recently you were only allowed to come to this spot and take a photograph here, basically where I'm filming from, and that was it. But now you are allowed to walk through much of Varosha. And so we've come at exactly the right time, because I suspect as more and more people come, they will start reopening stuff, and it will return to a kind of normality, which would be sad, because actually if it was normal, it'd just be like any other holiday resort in the Mediterranean. So what have we done today? Well, the obvious thing is we've gone from the Republic of Cyprus into the Turkish Republic of North Cyprus. We got up this morning in Larnaca after a very, very good meal. We had a fantastic final meal in Greek Cyprus, and I had a stefano, and Alex, I don't know what he had, but he had something very nice. Yeah. And then he bought a very nice bottle of wine, and it was an excellent, excellent meal that we had last night to see off our time in the Republic. Although of course I will be going back there, but he is going back, but only tomorrow, just to fly home. That's it. So then we got up and we took a bus to, I think it's called Dernier or Derenier. How do we pronounce it?
Derinia, they were pronounced.
Derinia, yeah. We pronounced it wrong, and the guy didn't even know where we were on about. On the way, quite interesting, we stopped at a bakery for a croissant, and it was a kosher bakery opened by an Israeli chap with a lot of Jewish clientele, and right next to it was the new synagogue. And apparently Cyprus is the only country in the EU not to have a synagogue until a few years ago, and they opened one. I think it's purely for tourists, because when we were at the airport yesterday dropping the kids off, dropping the car off, we saw a load of Israeli Jewish tourists, some Orthodox, getting off the plane and getting ready for their holiday. So that's that. The journey, not particularly interesting. It's a really boring corner of Cyprus, as I kind of hinted at in last night's video. you know, a lot of really scratchy villages, which is probably because a lot of people had to be resettled there from the north in the 1970s. So it's like really boring modern concrete architecture, and it's all pretty flat. One point of mild interest is we did pass through the British controlled area and saw some of the British bases for a while. But unfortunately, I was reading a Lawrence Durrell book and started to feel a bit sick, and so was, you know, wanting to throw up, and only felt better when I got off the bus. Then we had a little bit of a walk to the actual border checkpoint. That's an interesting church on the way. That was quite nice. And then again, very easy going through the checkpoints. You know, an absolute doddle. Just show your passport, and then we got a taxi on the other side that took us into Famagusta. Famagusta is perhaps my favourite place in Cyprus so far. It is absolutely incredible. Alex and I were talking about how, you know, the island really quite hasn't lived up to our expectations so far, but this is the exception. It really has exceeded everything. It's this fantastic Venetian walled city. The fortifications are more or less completely intact. But unlike other walled cities, like Nicosia, which are, you know, this warren of tiny streets, this is almost like a wasteland of ruins with a few modern houses dotted in between it. And I tell you what it makes me think of. So when I was in Petra, in Jordan, a couple of years ago, and of course, followers of my videos will know that there is a theory that Muhammad was born and brought up in Petra, not actually Mecca. And, you know, I could really relate to that, because in a place like that, the modern town would have been very small, surrounded by all these great glories of former ages. And I think it must be the same for people living in Famagusta today, because, you know, you've got these few houses, quite humble houses, dotted in between these mammoth ruins of great Catholic churches that have been ruined since, well, 1571, when they were bombarded and the Venetians chucked out quite gruesomely. The Turks promised the Venetian general, or whatever he was, governor, who resisted them for, I think it was about 11 months. They would treat him kindly, and they went back on their word and flayed him alive in the main square, and then stuffed his body full of straw and hung it up on the prow of a ship and took it to Istanbul. So yes, quite nasty. But since then, I think it's been a bit of a backwater, and not a lot's happened. The main site, of course, is the Lala Pasha Mosque, which is actually the old cathedral, and it looks just like one of those great French Gothic cathedrals. The frontage is meant to remind people of Reims. I to be honest, I thought Reims was a bit more impressive as a frontage, but I kind of get where they're coming from. What was interesting is, because it is a mosque, and we went inside, and it's you know, as mosques are, it's very plain, it's whitewashed, and it actually reminded me of those great Dutch Protestant churches more than anything else, you know, where they got rid of all their decoration, which, you know, does make me think, was Islam some early form of Protestantism, in the sense that they, you know, you get rid of the decoration and you go back to the source. And, you know, like Protestantism, you know, it kind of disappoints me a bit in that way, because I like all the interesting things to look at in religious buildings rather than empty spaces. But it was nice, though, because there was a service going on, and there was a guy reciting the Quran, and it was really quite beautiful, and it filled the whole building, and it was quite nice to just sit there and soak that in. So after that, we explored the old city of Famagusta. Lots and lots of ruined churches. I mean, some more complete than others. There was one that was a Nestorian church, which I thought was interesting, but, you know, you couldn't really tell it much apart from the others. There was an Armenian church. There were some that had been converted into mosques. Most hadn't. Most were just left to be ruins. And apparently, after the 74 action, a lot of Turks who'd fled from the south were put up in the church ruins before homes were found for them. So, yeah, that was that. We also had a look in the fortress, which they call it Othello's Tower, because, of course, Othello was said to be a port in Cyprus where his tower was. So, you know, most probably that one, that being Famagusta being the major port. And it was a nice, pleasant Venetian castle, pretty complete, really. There'd been some interesting restoration work done on it recently. And yes, that's about it. I guess the final would say is our accommodation is absolutely excellent.
Yeah.
The guy who runs it, really friendly, and the main body is a house that was built in the 50s by his grandfather. And apparently breakfast, all the produce is from the garden, and there's lemon trees that his grandfather planted, and other things, date palms. But what he's done is he's built some kind of apartments around, and we've got this beautiful apartment. It's not really a hotel; it's like an apartment, but with a view of the cathedral/mosque, which is absolutely incredible. And I'm very much looking forward to tonight, sitting on the balcony. And you know, toasting our goodbyes, because I said after tomorrow we've got a full day together tomorrow, but after that I say goodbye to Alex. I'll be going to Gurnia or Kyrenia and the northern coast, and he'll be flying home because he of course arrived before me. That's that. So here from the beautiful, is slightly surreal beach of Varosha. Keep travelling.
Είδετε ότι εγώ